My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm 36 years old. And 10 days ago, my sister tried to kill me for my father's inheritance. When I finally woke up in the hospital, she was sitting beside my bed pretending to cry and telling everyone I had tried to kill myself. The first thing I remember was the smell of antiseptic and the constant beeping of a machine beside me. My body felt heavy, like I had been buried under blankets of sand. When I tried to move my hand, it barely responded. "Rachel?" The voice sounded shaky. I turned my head slowly. My mother was sitting beside the hospital bed. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she hadn't slept for days. The moment she saw my eyes open, she burst into tears. "Oh my God, Rachel, you're awake!" A nurse rushed into the room, followed by a doctor. They started checking the monitors, shining a light in my eyes, asking questions I struggled to answer. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," I whispered. "Do you remember what happened?" I opened my mouth to respond, but my throat felt dry and tight. "Water." The nurse helped me take a small sip. The doctor glanced at the chart and then back at me. "You've been unconscious for 10 days," he said. 10 days. The number felt impossible. I stared at him, trying to process it. "What happened?" The doctor hesitated slightly before answering. "You suffered a severe sedative overdose." My mother squeezed my hand. "We thought we were going to lose you," she said through tears. Before I could respond, another voice spoke from behind her. A familiar voice, soft, concerned. "Thank God you woke up." My chest tightened. I turned my head. My younger sister Sophie was standing near the window. She walked closer and gently touched my arm. "You scared everyone," she said quietly. Her expression looked sad, but something about it felt wrong, like an actor delivering a line they had practiced too many times. "The doctor said you took too many sleeping pills," Sophie continued gently. My eyebrows pulled together. "I don't take sleeping pills." My voice came out weak, barely louder than a whisper. Sophie quickly looked at the doctor. "He must mean before she collapsed," she said calmly. Then she turned back to me. "You've been under so much stress since Dad passed away." My father. The memory hit me like a sudden wave. 4 months earlier, our father had died from a heart attack. He left behind a successful construction company, 2 properties, and several investments. But the real shock came when the lawyer read his will. Most of the estate had been left to me, not because I was the favorite, but because I had been the one living nearby, taking care of him during the last few years of his life, while his health slowly declined. Sophie lived in another city and rarely visited. She never forgave me for that will. "You manipulated him," she said the night we found out. "That's insane," I replied. "You think it's fair?" she snapped. 70% of everything goes to you?" The house had been filled with tension ever since. Arguments, cold silence, angry looks across the dinner table, until the night everything went black. I closed my eyes and forced my brain to dig through the fog. Fragments of memory slowly returned. My bedroom. The soft yellow light of the bedside lamp. A knock on the door. Sophie standing there with 2 cups of tea. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice had sounded different that night. Calmer. Almost apologetic. "I don't want Dad's death to destroy our relationship," she said. I remember feeling relieved. Maybe we were finally moving past the fighting. She handed me the tea. "You look exhausted," she said. "Drink this." I took a sip. It tasted slightly bitter, but I didn't question it. We talked for a few minutes. Then the room began spinning. My arms felt heavy. "Sophie," I remember saying slowly, "I feel weird." She watched me carefully. Too carefully. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was her voice. Soft, almost bored. "You should rest." Back in the hospital room, my heart began beating faster as the memory returned. I slowly opened my eyes again. Sophie was still standing beside the bed, watching me, studying my face. Not like a worried sister, like someone trying to figure out how much damage had been done. "Do you remember anything?" she asked carefully. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I slowly shook my head. "No." Relief flashed across her face. Just for a second, but I saw it. And in that moment I realized something important. Sophie wasn't afraid that I almost died. She was afraid that I might remember why. I closed my eyes again as if I was still exhausted. But inside my mind, another memory surfaced. A tiny detail from that night. Before Sophie knocked on my bedroom door, I had been on a long business call with one of our company's managers. A call that lasted almost 40 minutes. And whenever I have long calls like that, I record them. My heart began pounding slowly in my chest. Because if the recording kept running after the call ended, then the phone might have captured something Sophie never expected. The moment she walked into my room, and maybe the moment she tried to kill me, the doctors kept me in the hospital for 4 more days after I woke up. They said my body needed time to recover from the sedatives. My blood pressure was unstable, and sometimes the room spun if I tried to sit up too quickly. But the physical weakness wasn't what bothered me. It was the story everyone believed. According to Sophie, I had taken too many sleeping pills because I was overwhelmed after our father's death and the inheritance situation. And somehow, everyone accepted that explanation. Even the doctors seemed unsure what to believe. "You don't remember taking any medication?" one of them asked me carefully on the second day. "No," I said. He nodded slowly, writing something on his clipboard. "Well, the toxicology report shows a large amount of sedative medication in your system." "How large?" I asked. He hesitated. "Enough to stop your breathing." My chest tightened. "That's not a normal dose." "No," he admitted. "But it's possible if someone accidentally takes too many." Accidentally? The word sat heavily in the room. But I knew something they didn't. I didn't even own sleeping pills. Later that evening, Sophie came to visit again. She walked into the hospital room carrying flowers and a small bag of fruit like the most devoted sister in the world. "How are you feeling today?" she asked with a soft smile. "Better." She sat beside the bed and gently adjusted the blanket like she was taking care of a sick child. "I was so scared," she said quietly. Her voice trembled just enough to sound convincing. "When Mom found you unconscious, we thought it was too late. Mom found me." That detail stuck in my mind. If Sophie had been the last person in the room, why hadn't she called an ambulance? Instead, my mother had discovered me hours later. Sophie continued speaking, completely unaware of the thoughts racing through my mind. "You've been under so much pressure," she said gently. "After Dad died, and everything with the inheritance." I watched her carefully. She lowered her voice slightly. "Maybe you shouldn't rush back into handling the estate." There it was. The real reason behind the concern. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "Well," she said slowly, "managing Dad's company, the houses, the investments, that's a lot of responsibility." Her eyes met mine, especially after something like this. I understood exactly what she was doing. If people believed I was unstable, then the court could transfer control of the inheritance to someone else. Someone like her. "You think I can't handle it?" I asked. "I'm just worried about you," she replied quickly. Then she smiled softly. "Maybe I could help manage things for a while." I didn't answer. I simply watched her. Because the more she spoke, the more obvious her plan became. She believed I was confused, weak, still recovering. Most importantly, she believed I had no memory of that night. After a few minutes, she stood up. "You should get some rest," she said. Then she leaned down and kissed my forehead. "I'm just glad you're alive." When she left the room, the silence felt heavier than before. A few minutes later, a young nurse entered to check my IV. She glanced at the door before speaking quietly. "Your sister seems very protective of you." I forced a small smile. "She's always been like that." The nurse adjusted the drip and then looked at the chart. Her expression shifted slightly. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." She lowered her voice. "Did you drink anything unusual before you collapsed?" My heart skipped. "Why?" She hesitated before answering. "The sedative in your system wasn't swallowed in pill form." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "It was dissolved," she explained. "In liquid." The room suddenly felt colder. "Like in a drink?" She nodded slowly. "That would be the most likely explanation." A long silence followed. Then she gave me a small sympathetic look. "I shouldn't speculate," she added gently. "But accidents like this are unusual." After she left, I lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling, because the last small piece of doubt I had been holding on to disappeared in that moment. The sedatives had been mixed into something I drank, and the last drink I had before collapsing was the tea Sophie handed me. My breathing grew slower and heavier as the truth settled in. My sister hadn't just been angry about the inheritance. She had tried to remove the one person standing between her and the money. But she had made one mistake. She believed the only witness to what happened that night was dead. What she didn't know yet was that somewhere on my phone might still exist a recording that could destroy her entire plan. The day I was discharged from the hospital, the first thing I did when I got home was go straight to my bedroom. My mother kept insisting I should lie down and rest. "You're still weak," she said. "The doctor told you not to push yourself." "I just need a minute," I replied. But I wasn't interested in resting. I was interested in one thing: my phone. The hospital had returned my belongings in a small plastic bag: my clothes, my watch, and my phone with a completely dead battery. If my memory was right, that phone might hold the only proof of what really happened the night I almost died. My hands were shaking slightly as I plugged the charger into the wall. The screen stayed black for a few seconds. Then it lit up. The vibration felt louder than usual in the quiet room. My heart started pounding. I unlocked the phone and immediately opened the voice recording app. Dozens of files appeared on the screen. Work calls, meeting notes, contract negotiations. But one file instantly caught my attention. March 12th, call with Kevin. Length, 47 minutes. My chest tightened. The call I remembered that night had only lasted about 30 minutes, which meant the remaining 17 minutes had been recorded after the call ended. Exactly when Sophie came into my room. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment. Part of me almost didn't want to press play, because once I heard the truth, there would be no going back. Finally, I tapped the file. The recording began. At first, everything sounded normal. My voice, Kevin's voice. We were discussing a construction contract and scheduling issues for the company my father had left behind. Nothing unusual. Then the call ended. For a few seconds, there was only silence and the faint rustling of papers from my desk. Then, a knock. My entire body went still. The sound came clearly through the phone speaker. The door opening, footsteps, and then Sophie's voice. "Hey, can we talk?" Hearing it sent a chill through my chest. On the recording, I heard myself answer casually, "Sure." Then the faint sound of ceramic cups being placed on my desk. "I made tea," Sophie said. My stomach twisted as the memory lined up perfectly with the audio. "I thought we could start fresh." There was a soft clinking sound. A spoon stirring liquid. Metal tapping porcelain. "You look exhausted," Sophie said in the recording. "You should drink it." I heard myself take a sip. The conversation continued normally for a few minutes. We talked about Dad, about the tension between us, about the inheritance. Then my voice suddenly sounded different, slower, confused. "Sophie, I feel strange." A short silence followed. Then Sophie spoke again. But the warmth in her voice was gone. It was colder now, almost annoyed. That was faster than I expected. The words made my blood run cold. On the recording, I heard the sound of my chair shifting. "What? Did you?" My voice was slurred, weak. Sophie sighed. "You always had to be the responsible one," she said calmly. "The perfect daughter." My breathing in the recording had become heavy. "You stayed with Dad. You helped with the company. And now you get everything." I heard the sound of my body hitting the floor. The microphone captured the faint thud. Sophie walked closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Once you're gone, the will won't matter anymore." A few seconds passed. Then she said something that made my hands begin to shake uncontrollably. "You should have shared the money." Footsteps moved across the room. The door opened, then closed. The recording ended in silence. For a long time, I couldn't move. The phone felt heavy in my hands. Every doubt I had been clinging to was gone. There was no misunderstanding, no accident. My sister had tried to kill me, and worse, she believed she had gotten away with it. She thought I would never wake up. She thought the recording had stopped before she entered the room. And most importantly, she thought there was no proof left in the world. I slowly locked the phone screen and placed it on the desk. My breathing was calm again, but my mind had already made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Sophie immediately. I wasn't going to scream or accuse her in private. No, if I exposed her, everyone would hear the truth. My mother, my relatives, every person who believed her story about my overdose. And when the moment finally came, I would play the recording she believed was gone, the one that proved exactly what she had done. What Sophie didn't realize yet was that the moment she walked into my room that night, she didn't just poison her sister, she recorded the evidence that would destroy her own life. 2 weeks after I returned from the hospital, my mother suggested we have a family dinner. Officially, it was supposed to be about discussing the future of my father's estate. Unofficially, everyone knew the inheritance had become the biggest source of tension in our family. My father had left behind a construction company, 2 rental properties, and a large investment portfolio. According to the will, 70% of everything belonged to me. The remaining 30% went to Sophie. That decision had already caused arguments before my overdose. After the hospital incident, things became even more complicated. Some relatives began whispering that maybe the stress had been too much for me, that maybe managing the estate was too big of a responsibility right now. I knew exactly where those ideas were coming from. Sophie, that night, our dining room looked exactly the same as it had during every family gathering growing up. The same long wooden table, the same framed photos on the wall, but the atmosphere was completely different. My Uncle David sat at the end of the table beside my aunt. 2 cousins sat quietly on the other side. My mother moved nervously between the kitchen and the dining room. And Sophie sat directly across from me. She wore a soft beige sweater and had her hair tied back neatly. If someone didn't know our history, they would think she looked like the most caring daughter in the world. When our eyes met, she gave me a gentle smile. "How are you feeling now?" she asked. "Much better," I replied calmly. Dinner started with small talk. Weather, work, memories of my father. But everyone knew the real conversation hadn't started yet. Eventually, my uncle cleared his throat. "So," he said carefully, "we should probably talk about the estate." My mother sighed quietly. "Yes, your father would have wanted things organized." Before anyone else could speak, Sophie leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, concerned, almost sympathetic. "Actually," she said softly, "there's something we should talk about first." The room fell quiet. "What is it?" my aunt asked. Sophie glanced toward me with a worried expression. "Rachel has been through a very traumatic experience," she began. My mother immediately nodded. "She nearly died." "That's exactly my point," Sophie continued. "The doctors said it was a severe overdose." I watched her carefully. Every word sounded rehearsed. "I just think," she said gently, "we should be realistic about the situation." My uncle frowned. "What situation?" Sophie took a slow breath. "Managing Dad's company and properties is a huge responsibility." She paused. "And Rachel is still recovering." My cousin shifted in his chair. "What are you suggesting?" Sophie looked down at the table like she was reluctant to say the next part. "Maybe Rachel shouldn't handle everything alone right now." Silence filled the room. My aunt crossed her arms. "You mean you should handle it?" "I'm not saying that," Sophie replied quickly. "I just think someone should help." Her eyes moved back to me. "Someone stable." The implication hung in the air. My uncle looked uncomfortable. "That's a serious accusation." "I'm not accusing anyone," Sophie said softly. "I'm worried about my sister." She turned toward me with a sad expression. "You scared us all." "Rachel?" I said nothing. Sophie continued. "Maybe the estate should be temporarily managed by someone else until Rachel fully recovers." "And who would that be?" my uncle asked. Sophie hesitated just long enough to make it look thoughtful. "Well, I could help." There it was. The real reason behind everything. She believed I was still confused, weak, too shaken to fight back. And most importantly, she believed the only witness to what she had done was lying in the hospital with no memory. She had no idea what was sitting inside my purse, my phone, the recording, the proof. The room remained silent for a moment. Then Sophie added one final sentence. We all just want what's best for Rachel. I slowly placed my fork down on the table. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. Before we discuss the estate, I said calmly, I think everyone should hear something first. Sophie blinked. What do you mean? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I recently recovered something from the night I collapsed. My mother looked confused. What are you talking about? I met Sophie's eyes. And for the first time that evening, her smile faded slightly. I'm talking about the night I was poisoned. The room exploded with shocked voices. What? Poisoned? That's impossible. Sophie laughed nervously. Rachel, that's ridiculous. I tapped the screen on my phone. The recording began playing. My voice filled the room. Then the knock on my bedroom door, and Sophie's voice entering the recording. Her face turned completely white, because in that moment, she realized the one thing she thought had disappeared forever had survived. The moment the recording started playing, the entire dining room fell silent. At first, it sounded harmless. My voice, calm and professional, discussing a construction contract with one of our managers. My uncle frowned slightly. Is this a work call? He asked. Yes, I said quietly. Just listen. The conversation continued for another 30 seconds. Then the call ended. For a moment, there was only silence coming from the phone speaker. Then, a knock. My mother leaned forward in her chair. That's your bedroom door. The door opening echoed through the recording. Then Sophie's voice appeared. Hey, can we talk? Every person at the table slowly turned toward her. Sophie forced a small laugh. What is this supposed to prove? But her voice sounded tight now. The recording continued. I made tea, Sophie said in the audio. The faint sound of 2 cups being placed on my desk followed. My aunt frowned. You brought her tea that night? Sophie shrugged quickly. Yes. I was trying to calm her down. No one responded. Everyone kept listening. You look exhausted. Sophie's recorded voice said, You should drink it. A faint sip could be heard. The room grew heavier. My uncle's expression slowly hardened. Then my recorded voice spoke again. Sophie, I feel strange. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. What is this? Then Sophie's voice returned. But it didn't sound the same. The warmth was gone. The softness disappeared. In its place was something cold, flat, almost irritated. That was faster than I expected. The words slammed into the room like a gunshot. My cousin whispered, Oh my God. The recording continued. You always had to be the responsible one, Sophie said calmly in the audio. The perfect daughter. Across the table, Sophie had stopped breathing. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table. And now you get everything. The recording continued. My breathing in the audio became slow and heavy. Then came the sound of my body collapsing. A dull thud. My aunt gasped. Oh my God! The recording wasn't finished yet. Sophie's voice lowered to a whisper. Once you're gone, the will won't matter anymore. The phone speaker went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was my mother's uneven breathing. Then she slowly turned toward Sophie. Her face looked like it had drained of all color. Tell me that wasn't you, she whispered. Sophie shook her head immediately. That's fake, she said. Her voice cracked. That recording is edited. My uncle slammed his hand on the table. That's clearly your voice. No, it isn't, Sophie snapped. She pointed at me. She's manipulating all of you. I leaned back slightly in my chair. You admitted everything in that recording. I never said I poisoned you. My cousin stared at her. You literally said the will wouldn't matter if she was gone. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? My uncle demanded. Sophie opened her mouth. Closed it again? She had no explanation, because every person in the room had heard the same thing. My mother suddenly started crying. How could you do this? She sobbed. She's your sister. Sophie stood up so quickly her chair nearly fell backward. You're all insane, she shouted. She took everything from me. The room froze. The moment the words left her mouth, Sophie realized what she had just done. My uncle slowly stood up. What did you just say? Her breathing became fast and uneven. Dad gave her everything, Sophie yelled. She manipulated him. No, she didn't, my aunt said firmly. You're the one who just confessed. I didn't confess anything. but the panic in her voice made it clear she was losing control. Sophie turned toward me again. Her eyes burned with anger. "You think this proves anything?" she said. "This is just a family argument." She laughed bitterly. "You have no real evidence." The room fell quiet again. Everyone looked at me, waiting. I calmly picked up my phone from the table. "You're right," I said. Sophie's shoulders relaxed slightly. For the first time since the recording played, she looked relieved. But then I continued. "That recording alone isn't enough?" She frowned. "What are you talking about?" I looked directly into her eyes. "That's why I gave it to the police last week." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" And right at that moment, there was a loud knock on the front door. The knock on the front door echoed through the house. No one moved. The entire dining room had gone completely silent. Sophie stood frozen beside the table. Her eyes locked on me like she was trying to decide whether I was bluffing. "You're lying," she said quietly. Her voice didn't sound confident anymore. I didn't answer. The knock came again. Louder this time. My mother wiped her tears and looked toward the hallway. Who could that be? No one responded. My uncle slowly stood up from his chair. "I'll check." Sophie's breathing became shallow. As my uncle walked toward the door, her eyes never left my face. "You didn't call the police," she whispered. I met her gaze calmly. "I didn't need to call them tonight." Her expression tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means they've already heard the recording." Her face went pale. In the hallway, the front door opened. A few seconds later, my uncle's voice came from the entrance. "Yes?" A deep voice answered. "Good evening. We're looking for Sophie Bennett." The dining room went completely still. My uncle stepped aside. Two uniformed police officers walked into the house. The moment Sophie saw them, the color drained from her face. One of the officers looked around the room. "Is Sophie Bennett here?" No one spoke. Then slowly, every person at the table turned toward her. The officer followed their gaze. His eyes landed on Sophie. "Miss Bennett?" She looked like she might collapse. What is this about?" The officer stepped closer. "We received a report regarding a suspected poisoning." My mother gasped. "What?" The officer continued calmly. "The report includes an audio recording and medical toxicology results." Sophie shook her head quickly. "This is insane." Her voice trembled. "She's lying." The officer looked at me. "You're Rachel Bennett?" "Yes." "You submitted the recording 3 days ago?" "I did." The officer nodded. "We've reviewed the audio." He turned back to Sophie. "And we'd like to ask you some questions about the night Rachel Bennett was hospitalized." Sophie laughed nervously. "You can't be serious." But no one else in the room was laughing. My uncle crossed his arms. "Looks serious to me." Sophie looked around desperately. "Mom, tell them this is ridiculous." My mother couldn't even look at her. "I heard the recording," she whispered. "You said you wanted her gone." "That's not what I meant." The officer's voice cut through the chaos. "Miss Bennett, please come with us." Her panic exploded. "You can't arrest me." "We didn't say you were under arrest yet," the officer replied calmly. "But you are the primary suspect in an attempted poisoning investigation." Sophie's legs seemed to weaken beneath her. She turned slowly toward me. Her eyes were filled with rage. "You planned this," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you did." The officer gently took her arm. "We need you to come with us." For a moment, Sophie looked like she might scream again. But instead, she leaned closer to me. Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You ruined my life." I looked back at her. "You tried to end mine." The officers began guiding her toward the door. She didn't fight anymore. The front door closed behind them. And just like that, my sister's plan to steal our father's inheritance collapsed in front of the entire family. But the truth was, the worst part of the story hadn't even begun yet. After the police took Sophie away, no one at the table moved for a long time. The house felt strangely quiet, like something fundamental had just been ripped out of it. My mother was the first to speak. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "I don't understand." She looked at me with red, exhausted eyes. How could this happen between my daughters? I didn't know how to answer that, because the truth was something none of us wanted to accept. Greed had turned our family into strangers. My uncle finally broke the silence. "You did the right thing," he said. If Rachel hadn't brought the recording forward, we might never have known the truth. My aunt nodded slowly. But I still can't believe Sophie would go that far. Neither could I, even after hearing the recording myself. Part of my mind still struggled to connect the girl I grew up with to the voice that calmly watched me collapse on the floor. But the investigation quickly proved what we had already heard. 3 days later, the police contacted me again. A detective asked me to come to the station to give a formal statement. When I arrived, he showed me several pieces of evidence they had found during their search. The first was a bottle of prescription sleeping pills discovered in Sophie's apartment. The label had someone else's name on it, which meant she had obtained them illegally. The second piece of evidence was even worse. Her laptop. The detective turned the screen toward me. Several search results were still visible in the browser history. How many sleeping pills cause overdose? How long until sedatives stop breathing? How to dissolve pills in hot drinks? I felt a chill spread through my chest, because it meant something important. This hadn't been a sudden emotional decision. It had been planned, carefully, patiently. The detective closed the laptop. With the recording, toxicology report, and this search history, the case is very strong, he said. What happens now? I asked quietly. She'll be formally charged with attempted murder and poisoning. The words sounded heavy, permanent. 3 months later, the trial began. I had to sit in the courtroom and listen as the recording of that night was played for the jury. Hearing it again felt worse than the first time, because now Sophie was sitting only a few feet away. She stared straight ahead during the entire recording. She never once looked at me. The jury didn't take long to reach their verdict. Guilty, my mother cried again when the sentence was announced. Not because she doubted the outcome, but because in that moment she realized something final. Her family would never be the same again. After the trial ended, the lawyer handling my father's estate contacted me. With Sophie convicted of attempted murder against another heir, she legally forfeited her claim to the inheritance. Everything transferred completely to me. The company, the houses, the investments, exactly as my father had originally intended. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sophie had tried to kill me to take the inheritance, and in the end, her actions ensured she would never receive a single dollar of it. But the truth is, it never felt like a victory, because the inheritance wasn't the thing I lost the night I drank that cup of tea. The thing I lost was my sister, and no amount of money my father left behind could ever replace the family we used to be.